Hey, this is Sam, one half of Transcripts of the Moon Witch. Just here to say thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy this collaborative writing project. I'm an author in Seattle just trying to make something happen and just trying to showcase the process of making a world and writing stories. I hope you enjoy and take it away, my sibling Grit.
Hey, this is Grit here. I use they, them pronouns. I live in Minneapolis with my partner and my cat. Currently in college for creative writing at Goddard College. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be doing this project. I think one of the main things, besides enjoying creating new worlds, especially with my brother, is that I'm really enjoying showing my unedited work and just letting it be and not being a perfectionist about it, and really hoping that that inspires you too, and that you're able to enjoy this world that we're in and just get a reprieve from how shitty this world can be. And I just really hope that that translates to you. Yeah, excited to have you here. Thanks.
And
welcome, people of the world, young, old, and eternal. This is the Transcripts of the Moon Witch podcast, hosted by me, Grit, and my brother, Sam.
thank you for tuning into our bi-weekly podcast, where we share our writing with each other as we work together to build a fantasy world. Not entirely just like our own, but perhaps a little bit cooler.
Yeah, this is our first ever episode, and so we're really excited to be sharing it with you. You can find transcripts for this and all our episodes for free on our Patreon site. And if you'd like, you can feel free to become a member on our Patreon for early releases of our podcast and additional episodes where Sam and I are talking about our lives and our relationship to each other, and maybe even work we've shared that doesn't have anything to do with the world we're writing here. We'd love to have you over on Patreon as well.
Hey, this is Sam from the future saying our Patreon doesn't exist, but there is a coffee, because we recorded this before I quit being a barista, and I was still sick of coffee and thought I needed patrons. But now that I've quit, I've realized I don't need patrons, but I do need coffee. We didn't know this, so we're going to say Patreon a lot. Ignore that. It's coffee. Coffee! Great. Okay, back to the thing. And as always, our listeners are welcome to join us for whatever episode calls to them. Our podcast is non-linear, made up of one short story every episode. And you don't necessarily need to know how our previous stories went, as we won't be bringing back the same characters or storylines in the following week. Sort of. Maybe we might bring them back a little bit, but in a way where it's easy for you to get into them. I like storylines. I that's how I write. I can't change that. That's why I like. But it'll be inviting. You know, you'll be able to get into it.
We're all
the characters will be different.
Yeah, for sure.
I do like that you booed me and then, well, we're trying our best.
I mean, yeah. So, okay, how about you tell us about the world that we've started, since there is no context for the listeners.
So all we've set up for this world so far is that it's set on Earth with the 7 continents, but it's a magical world with a bunch of different magical creatures. We haven't gone into the specifics. I'm a writer, not a talker, of what all of those magical creatures are, but we have discussed elves, which by the time they're 20 years old, they are 7 feet tall, but then they start shrinking, and so by the time they're 100, they're little tiny guys.
Yeah, fuck you, Tolkien.
And besides that, we've set up a almost deific-esque figure, a witch who lives in the moon and Twitch streams a daily oracle reading, speaking of what the day will be and what will come. She's always accurate, but since she's reading for the collective Earth, her readings are kind of vague, so it's kind of easy for her to be accurate. But there's a lot of different religious sects based around this moon witch. Does she tell the future? Does she create the future? Blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot more to do with that. Yeah, did I forget anything?
I feel like that's most of it. I do want to say, I feel like, I don't know if we came to complete agreement on if she's broadcasting this through Twitch.
Yeah, I just
she's
said Twitch
getting
because
it-
that's like an easy word, but
Yeah, she's getting it down to the human beings in some way. I don't know if I really like the Twitch as a platform specifically.
that's super fair. I kind of like the idea of it being I think of Twitch as stupid. I don't know how real life we want to be, like one-to-one. Some of the comments you made in your story make me think it's closer to our reality than not, just with magic.
Yeah, I think it's like I literally
but-
have a reaction to the idea of somebody who is so fucking old wasting their life energy on Twitch.
Wow. For the viewers, I for a while tried to be a Twitch streamer, so now we're getting the full story. What Grit's opinions of that are.
No shade.
And I think we could get into it more after the short stories, but some of what you wrote makes me think that she's not the one who decided to stream on Twitch, right? Like she's doing a reading, and there's like a guy in the background. And it doesn't have to be Twitch. I'm really not locked into Twitch. I think it needs to be a live streaming service like YouTube or Kick. Do you know anything about Kick?
Let's not do brand names overall.
All right, that's fair. We can make a new streaming service. Real quick, just because I think it might be funny to throw into the world in like some way. Kick is a streaming service that was created after Twitch banned gambling streams on this site that like is an online casino, and that online casino made their own streaming platform so people could watch gambling on it. And it's become very popular, but it's like this horrible like Wild West world right now, and it's very interesting.
I gotta admit, that's more the shit that I want to watch. That is way more what I'm into. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys go on there because they don't have any moderation, so you can say whatever you want. So it's definitely like a worse place. Like it's a worse place, but it's much funnier than Twitch.
Yeah, but like, I kind of, I love the dive bar
Yeah.
because in some ways you're like, oh wow, shit's about to get real problematic,
Oh yeah, it is very dive bar-y. One of the big guys on there, he's very outspoken against porn. He thinks it's amoral to watch, but also he just watched porn for an hour on the streaming site where most of his audience are kids.
Yeah, sorry to move you along, but
Sorry,
this could just go on forever.
I derailed us, but
So, you wrote a story, I wrote a story. Should there be any context you're giving for your story? Like, what was it that you were trying to capture? Or what was your goals?
yeah, the first thing was we decided on the oracle reading of red balloons,
Right.
or maybe just balloons. My brain put red balloons, but you just put balloons, so I wonder if I just put in the red. Because when I think of balloons, I think of red balloons. So yeah, we're going to do each story kind of based on what the oracle's reading is, but make it vague. We also discussed setting many of our stories in Arizona, a place where both of us grew up. And so we have a connection to that landscape. Though neither of us have lived there in,
10 years?
for me, almost a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a decade, but it's still home. You just said that in the strangest way possible. We grew up in Arizona, it's our home.
Well, see, the thing is, I don't think of it as my home. It's
Yeah.
where I was raised.
Okay.
But I see your point. So that's most of the context for my thing. Also, I wanted, my goal was to create a vehicle for me to build other stories off of. And so what my first story is introducing that that vehicle. I guess that's an accurate way of putting it.
Cool.
What about you?
So, my story, I was initially like, oh, I'm going to write something in Arizona. And then I didn't. It really is. I live in Minneapolis right now, and it's really based a lot more on the landscape that I'm currently living in. I don't know if that's super reflected in the story, but that's fine. I think the main thing for my story was I wanted to be introducing characters that I actually are like people that I know that are like me, queer, trans, anarchists that are a little rowdy sometimes, and just like have more like, I get a little tired in fantasy where I'm just like, people don't feel real to me. And so this was a way of just being like, these are the people that I know. This is my community. And also I wanted to like have some fantasy, but I enjoy when it's a little more, when I find it funny.
That makes sense.
So I guess it was sort of that. And also just to establish, like, it's kind of a weird thing to have, you know, a moon goddess shining down like prophecies and oracle things in the midst of like capitalism. Like, it's a weird world. And so I just sort of wanted to play with that.
I adore what you did with it. I would love for you to start, if you're okay with that.
Balloons, whispered the goddess witch, her words sweeping down across the land, whisking around dusty towns and city blocks, sweeping over fields of summer corn, breathing across the baking roads, and creeping through windows into sleeping ears. Carly, you gotta hurry up. It's not my fault they killed most of it. Dude, she's just a fucking loony. She won't even know if you get the wrong thing. Carly pursed her lips at Rocco, and they knew to shut up. They were both tired. They'd been searching the Greenway belt, dodging bicyclists and runners for 4 hours as they pushed through bushes and thickets to check the fence lines and overgrown bits with disturbed soils. Regulars hate the witchy herbs, especially if they're not garden ornamentals, and the Parks and Rec department had been on a rampage against deadly nightshade lately. Fucking colonizers, she grumbled. Fine, let's go to the wienery. Call her from there to set up a new plan. The wienery sat at the end of a half block of tan brick storefronts, its entry shaded by trees and a black cloth awning. It was a bustling area. They were just as likely to see a car break-in around midday as they were to watch a gaggle of college students descend on the restaurants, half drunk and laughing, at 1 a.m. But once the wienery's doors closed behind them, that world disappeared, and they became encased in a place where only hot dogs and fries mattered. The 3 booths along the wall were covered in boxes of soda and ketchup, leaving only the graying bar stools for seating. The walls were bare except where the cooking grease had become a glue for dust. It was ramshackle, but the people shoving brats into their face clearly didn't care. It was the rare establishment where aesthetic didn't matter. It was Carly's favorite place to get a break from it all. Rocco tried 3 different hot dogs before deciding that they preferred the Minneapolis style and ate 2 more. Carly ate 1 hot dog, classic Chicago style, and a Coke, before she crumpled up her napkins and started dialing the number she had memorized but knew never to save. Lives of crime and all. Rev picked up on the first ring. Hello? She didn't have Carly's number saved either. Hey, love, I'm so sorry. We searched for 4 hours, but I couldn't find any nightshade anywhere. Lots of holes where the city pulled them out, but nothing we can use. Well, shit. 28 days ago, Rev had had a dream, a vision, in which the woman in the moon had come to her. In the dream, the goddess witch had told Rev to start a ceremony that would last for 28 days. And then she said, we had to use the daily horoscope things, Rev said while pulling on the overalls she had shoplifted earlier. Okay, and then what? Carly had asked, propped up on Rev's bed. Rev's memory was a little murky on the details, but she knew that if they completed a ceremony using the moon's daily fate casts, then something would happen. And it'd have to be good, right? She didn't come to me in my dreams to tell me something that would end disastrously, said Rev, pruning in front of her bedroom mirror. Carly was not at all assured, but she also wasn't about to ignore a direct message from the Moon Witch, and Rev didn't know shit about ceremonies. The following 27 days had been chaotic and full, but they had pulled off a ceremony every night. About a week in, they realized they couldn't realistically steal the wood for About a week in, they realized that they couldn't realistically steal the wood needed for a bonfire every night, so they started finding other ways to make ceremony. They washed their loved ones with forspoken water, built altars outside of the city jails and courthouses, cooked feasts for everyone they knew. They even convinced some friends that it was time that they got married, and they planned the whole thing in 3 days. They would most certainly get divorced sooner or later, but there wasn't a dry eye at the ceremony. Most everyone thought they were crazy, but every night at least a few friends would join Rev and Carly in Rocco's backyard. They were the only one they knew with a private backyard that they... let me go back. Most everyone thought that they were crazy, but every night at least a few friends would join Rev and Carly in Rocco's backyard, the only one they knew with a private backyard. Well, they figured out how to incorporate that day's fate cast into the ritual they were planning. Some days incorporating the Moon Witch's words were simple. They washed all their stained clothes at the word stain. They did one ceremony only speaking in whispers, and one night they sang songs of healing at a particularly racist and homophobic church. But some days the fate cast took a lot of interpretation. When the witch spoke about preferences, they made a whole show at a feast about how everyone has their own preferred foods and how it's a beautiful part of life and not to yuck each other's yums. On day 23, the witch casted president. They burned pictures of every president they could think of and hoped it wouldn't count against them. I mean, she can't expect us to just ignore our political beliefs because she drew some tarot card today, right? Said Rev, squirting extra lighter fluid on Reagan's face. And now the day was finally here, day 28. Carly and Rev wanted to go out with a bang. They had thought about tons of potential closing ceremonies that would put a nice end to the work of the last 4 weeks, but nothing felt right. They were sick of lighting fires and cooking, and nighttime swimming had lost its fun when Carly ended up with a fish lure impaling her foot. If only one of us was having a baby, muttered Rev. I mean, we could try drugs, said Rocco as they lit a cigarette. Rev and Carly turned towards them. It was the first time in the last 4 weeks that Rocco had contributed any thought to the ceremony planning. They'd always been content to sit and smoke while Rev and Carly brainstormed and gathered supplies. I mean, we haven't really done that yet, said Rev, stroking her stubbled chin. Would be something new. I thought we were going to throw a party with a lot of balloons, said Carly. Yeah, but how many parties have you been to that felt like a ceremony once everyone started drinking? How do you make drugs feel like a ceremony, though? Rev paused at this. Her mind was worrying so hard that Carly and Rocco could almost hear it. What about that zine you lent me ages ago? The one about flying ointment? I thought you threw that out after you spilled bong juice all over it, Carly. Well, yeah, I did, but I also looked through it a bit, and there was one plant with the little red berries hanging off of it. They kind of look like balloons if you think about it, said Rev. Deadly nightshade? You want to make hallucinogenic flying ointment from deadly nightshade? Said Carly. Rev started cackling. Yes I do. Well, I'll end up poisoned, mumbled Carly. So she and Rocco went off to go find some. After the hot dogs were done, Carly and Rocco made it to the backyard deflated. I guess I'll just start sending party invites, said Carly. Rev popped her head over the fence, a manic grin all over her face. Never doubt the will of the Moon Queen, she shouted, holding up a wilted but healthy-looking plant, red berries bobbing as she shook it. The team flew into action, and by the time dusk started to fall, they had made one salve tin of deadly nightshade flying ointment. Do y'all have any idea how much we're supposed to use? Asked Rocco. None at all, said Rev, but no way to find out but by trying. She dipped her finger into the salve and wiped a glob over her wrists and eyelids. Join me.
Jesus.
Join me, she said, passing Carly the tin. Well, fuck it, said Carly. She and Rocco dipped their fingers, and they all began to fly. The night went as you'd expect with 3 people hallucinating as part of a ceremony. They sang and they shouted and they danced. By daybreak, the effects had worn off, and they'd all begun to wander off to bed. I wonder what the Moon Witch will do for us now, said Rev blearily. Won't have to wonder long, said Carly as they approached their house. There was a figure at their doorstep, dressed in a black trench coat and a rag tied around their eyes. Sister Rev, do you approach? Asked the being. Yes, I'm here, said Rev, rushing forward. Direct from the goddess herself, I present you with a monthly subscription for Moonlight to Light, the goddess's newsletter on all things lunar, said the figure, passing Rev a magazine glossy with a photo of the moon on front. May her light never wane, they said, as they walked off the doorstep into the morning light. Wait, are you serious? Rev said to the creature's back. As the night falls, it shouted back, before climbing into their Uber and driving away. I'll be damned, said Rev. Right, well, let's go get some sleep.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. We did do this before. What kind of feedback are you looking for?
Oh, I'm hoping for most anything. I feel like in some ways this piece was just sort of fun to write, so it wasn't like I had like a whole lot of like here's what I'm really striving for. It was just sort of a like practicing writing something that's short because yeah, I feel like the length cap really actually was very hard for me in this. So anything you want to think of to share?
You know, honestly, like, you know, I'm not going to say it's perfect because, you know, there are some typos. I actually didn't notice any grammatical issues, but it feels like a safe bet in 6 pages there's one grammatical error. But I really enjoyed this story. It does, like, on a second go through, I am realizing that I have absolutely no idea what the flying ointment does. My first read through, I was like, okay, so they flew around a bit, but this time I'm like, wait, did they fly? Or were they just hallucinating the whole time? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. There is something very funny about that. Like, not knowing, like, are they actually, is it like flying as in flying, or is it flying as in, like, mentally flying? But that is something I noticed. I do think this story is very funny because you made just 2 hardline choices in defining our world in this little silly story, right? Like, you immediately defined Reagan as canon to this world. Like, Reagan happened.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
He's here now. Reagan is part of this world. No escaping him. People, you know, people have their opinions of him, but he's here. And you also, like, literally immediately after we create this moon goddess, this mysterious moon witch telling the future, very cool concept, you immediately turned her into this fucking tacky, like, give me a ritual, here's a newsletter. Like, she, you know, in my mind, those ceremonies gave her something, right? They were done in the name of the moon goddess. There was some magical exchange of energy that happened there that she benefited from, and she gave them a newsletter. It just immediately makes her out to be kind of scummy and like scammy, and I love it. I think that's great. Why else would she be live streaming these oracle readings every day? Like, you don't start a religion if you aren't a little bit, like, maybe not scummy, but definitely, like, ambitious. And if she's lived for thousands of years, I think that she kind of probably has a lack of respect for morality that I think was beautifully displayed with this. And I love the being. You know, black trench coat with a rag tied around their eyes. That's so good. I love the idea of that being the, like, accoutrement of the night witches, the moon witches, priests, like members of her faith. I really like that idea.
Yeah, and I'm not like super like every single person who's really into the moon witch is gonna look like this, but to me it was like also really entertaining because, like, in some ways the trench coat is a stereotype, right? But we know that stereotype is like, oh, that's not good. Like, if somebody's coming, if somebody with a black trench coat and especially with a rag tied around their eyes is at your doorstep, you're in fucking trouble. But they're mostly actually just like a mailman, turns out. So.
Yeah, you're in trouble, but it's a mailman, but also there is, like, a little bit of logic to it, like, the moon witch guides my step, I need not my eyes. Yeah. Like, okay, dude, chill out with your moon witch faith.
Yeah.
And Moonlight Delight.
Yeah, I found that rhyme in my mind. I was like, oh, I have to. I cannot. I'm so sorry, world. But here we
Like,
go.
what a nightmare that this Moon Witch has this goddess's newsletter of all things lunar. I really like that at the end, Rev goes, "Are you serious?" And then just, "I'll be damned." And it really ends with, "Is this a good thing?" Like, was this a good outcome? I don't know. I don't know how Rev feels about it after getting this monthly subscription, which makes me think they got one free subscription. Like, I don't think they got, like, even a full year out of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but...
Yeah, my sort of feeling was it. I was like, here's one free, and then feel free to subscribe. Like...
What a scam!
Yeah. Yeah, I, like, had thought about writing it differently, where, like, Rev would be like, see, like, nothing disastrous happened. But honestly, I was like, I actually don't know how she feels about this. So,
and it's late in the morning. She just finished a hallucinogenic ceremony. Like, well, I'll be damned. All right, let's go to bed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I really liked that, and I do want to say I really liked the characters of Rev and Carly. Rocco was there too, and I liked the contributions Rocco gave, but they were mostly they weren't the focus of this story. But I felt like you created a solid relationship for Rev and Carly without ever talking about the relationship between Rev and Carly. Like, it wasn't at all the focus of this, and just with a couple of words, I felt we were in a fun little dynamic. It says, there was one line that I didn't catch the first read through. Where is it? What about that zine you lent me ages ago? And then Carly, I thought you threw that out. And the idea of someone just throwing out a zine that someone else lent them.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me. It's just such a specific person. Like, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of fun creating those characters. I honestly struggled because I really had a way clearer image of Rocco, and I had a lot more written about them. But then was like, I have to keep this word count down. Nobody needs to know that Rocco, like, drinks Malort. Like, But I felt like I actually didn't even get into too deeply, like, what Rev and Carly look like, or any of these things, and was like, I really would like to, but right now I'm focused on the trajectory of this plot. And so I sort of struggled there. And I also spent a decent amount of time talking about the Wienery, which is a real place here in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Because I was also like, I really feel like I need to plant myself physically somewhere, and this place actually creates to me a solid, in like elaborating on this one particular place, it immediately creates a contrast to what the rest of the world is looking like. And so I felt like I needed to do that to create other stories, so that like future stories could have that world already developed. But it was hard. I really wanted to talk about the characters more.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's hard finding that balance of creating foundation, but also in this short format, creating characters that you care about. I think you rode that line very well, in my opinion. I think you did really good. And, I know that we literally said in the intro, like, it would be new characters every short story. I do think, in my opinion, it should be new, like, perspective characters. Like, most of this was from the perspective of Carly, but I want to go back to Minneapolis and see other people interacting with Rev and Carly. I want to see the perspective of Rocco doing some gritty shit, like, I want to explore these characters more. Like, I want to read about them more. Yeah, I'm just so fascinated by their life, this community, because the way you talk, they clearly have a bit of a community, and I wanna learn more about it. And I think that it can still be accessible to people coming in 5 episodes later, and they just hear about Jimbo going to one of Rev and Carly's ceremonies. I doubt they're doing more ceremonies.
Jesus
I would
Christ.
never do another ceremony in my fucking life after this, but...
Oh, I wanted to talk really quickly. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but the reason also I chose flying ointment is because this shit is real.
What?
I have a book about how to make nightshade flying ointment. I do not do this at home, listeners. Jesus Christ. I will not have this on my conscience. It is poisonous. It is dangerous.
Do you actually put on your eyelids?
And your wrists. And
That's nuts!
anywhere essentially where your like veins are closer to your skin, you can put it.
That's so bad!
I mean, here's the thing though, is like actually witches fly on broomsticks, and back in the day, people would put this flying ointment on, and then their minds would fly. They would do cleaning ceremonies with their brooms, so it's like sweeping. And this is where these stereotypes about witches come from, that have now become, you know, like the image of like the pointed hat in the sky on a broom comes directly from these things. And it is a thing where it's also like, do people actually fly? Like, were people actually physically flying? Because it's a disassociative drug, is my understanding. And so you see yourself from above you.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
I just went on the Wikipedia for this, and I can't like read the entire thing right now. But there's one section that's literally body in coma and riding on beasts.
Yeah, no, like, this shit is real, this shit is cool, this shit is dangerous.
Yeah, like, don't do it. Like, please don't do it, but read about it, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, and I don't know, I just, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I daydream so hard about doing that, and it would not be, like, impossible to do. But, yeah, I guess I just wanted to bring that into this world because it's actually in our world, but it's also crazy. So.
Yeah, that's nuts, and I love that you brought it in. I do kind of hope now that in our world it actually makes you fly. Maybe not like high, you're just like floating above the ground as you disassociate, but just having that little extra magical kick to it. It's also called lycanthropic ointment.
Huh, I have no idea what that means.
Lycanthropy is werewolves.
Oh.
That's, oh man, I could just deep dive. Like, why?
You're
How? Oh,
welcome.
yeah. All right. That's a new hyper focus to get into at some point. Hyperfixation. Amazing. So I really liked your piece.
Yeah. Let's do yours. I'm really excited to hear your piece.
Yeah. I'm going to admit I cheated a little bit. After sending you my piece, I edited it and sent you a new one. And it was after reading your piece, I threw in a line or two that it simultaneously like made the world smaller and more connected, and I'm okay to change the line I changed back, but I really liked
fine.
it, so we can get opinions on it after.
Sick.
Red leather, yellow leather. All right. You might think you're soldiering silly now, but in 150 years you'll be so grateful to have come along, chattered old Silas, the method of communication he exclusively used. Chattering, never speaking, never whispering, not even shouting. Only ever a constant stream of words running over each other like water from a geyser. Peregrine simply nodded his head and turned to feign tightening a knot on one of the basket handles. Of course, there wasn't much for him to do at this point. Silas had been running the young man ragged since dawn, prepping the balloon for launch, so much so that he hadn't had a chance to check his phone all day. No texts. He had been hoping for an update on Reverend Carley's most recent ceremony, but no such luck. All he had was the transcript from the Moon Witch's most recent soothsaying. His eyes were drawn to the last section. Red balloons. That an entire civilization followed her words like gospel was flabbergasting. Shaking his head, a lock of brown hair came loose from his bun, draping over a sharply pointed ear. Peregrine slid it back along his head, pausing to touch the tip of his ear delicately. For now, it was the only proof of his race to speak of, and the teenager wasn't yet certain whether he loved it for that fact or hated it.
looking out over the crag-filled earth below, full of jagged rocks intent on blockading all life from thriving, and scraggly plants giving them the middle finger. His eyes were not nearly as sharp as they would be in the centuries to come, but Peregrine could still make out the creatures following suit. Cicadas clinging to tree bark, birds hiding in boughs, and lizards skittering under the very boulders that wished to make life impossible. A pointless task, for life always found a way. An errant gust of wind reminded Peregrine that the opposite held equally as true. Death was equally pernicious and perhaps even more ravenous. Sprawling against the side of the basket, he shot a glare up at the foul balloon, taking him to his doom. The blue leather seemed to laugh at him as it rippled with the wind. Whether it popped or remained aloft, the end would be the same as far as Peregrine was concerned. "Oi, get away from the edge before you topple us all," Silas chattered, his tone the same as ever. "You youngins are all the same, throwing your weight around like it ain't the daftest thing you could do. I had a nephew once who took a whole slice of pie and..." Peregrine turned to look down at his blathering uncle, fighting to keep the annoyance from his face. He had quickly realized that the best strategy with the old elf was to simply ignore what he was saying. It was easier than one might have thought, because Silas always spoke in the same monotone voice. Though the natural high pitch of that voice made it hard to take anything he said seriously. Though his uncle was called Old Silas, he wasn't even 1,000 years old yet. He was simply the oldest of 3 brothers, all named Silas. Given his relative youth, Silas was still several inches tall, able to contend with all but the largest of Peregrine's fingers. Eventually, he would be as small as the smallest of microbes, and would then join the glorious viral crusade. Peregrine rolled his eyes. Glorious was one way of describing it. Idiotic was another. To give up all the joys and wonders of modern life to live in a sea of bacteria held no interest to the young elf. He had met so many fantastic people, made glorious friends, and due to his blood, he was expected to give all that up. Silas strutted about the small table fastened to the center of the basket, which was large enough for 16 broad-shouldered men to stand in comfortably. Hundreds of elves, all centuries old, were crammed within. The layers of the wicker basket had been turned into strata for various shelves and inlaid houses to be constructed. It was a veritable village, the Crossing Void, as it was called in Elvish. Silas was the mayor of the little basket town, and as such, his table held a little mansion, 3 floors tall and spanning dozens of inches in width. Atop it was a great tower, relative to the minuscule size of it all, from which Silas could captain the vessel. Could being the operative word, as so far in the voyage he'd simply commanded his beleaguered nephew to perform all necessary tasks for him. Towering above the crowd at 7.5 feet tall, Peregrine regarded the occupants with disdain. Why should he have to be relegated to manual labor simply because of his enormous advantage in size? And why should fate be so cruel as to take that size away from him in time, reducing him to as pathetic as these tiny wretches? Frowning in frustration, Peregrine let out a loud huff and whipped around to look out across the mountainous desert. A shadow of massive pine trees could be seen rising in the distance, towering over the shrubbery and cacti that had laid claim to the land beyond the forest. This momentous sight, a vision of greenery and red desert clashing, was completely lost on Peregrine, who only saw more dirt and leaves. None of that was as interesting to him as the looming silhouette stepping through the pine trees as if they were nothing more than grass on a poorly tended lawn. Rathagir, the desert worm, was awake. Uncle! Peregrine managed to sputter out. What is it, lad? I haven't heard you cry out like that since that time you knocked over that Wendigo's whiskey at old Yaga's Bar and Grill out in the Dakotas. You remember, I never wanted to go out that way to begin with, but your parents were so insistent on going on an adventure into the unknown, and you have to know how your father loves to eat. So after our flight, Silas happily chattered away, focus focused on arranging a tiny coffee table set up at the center of the table he stood upon. Not the time! I thought you said Rathargir was sleeping! Peregrine practically shrieked, lost in fright as he looked upon the stupidly large beast moving towards them. Its long, sinuous body, snake-like in its scales and wriggling motions, twisted for miles, the distant lengths of it hidden from view by the evening sun's light reflecting off its golden scales. Every step brought the one-time Empire Crusher closer to the balloon, but at an eerily slow pace given the puny nature of its legs. Peregrine scoffed at himself. Puny? Each leg was easily 1/2 kilometer in length. The rest of its body simply made that seem minuscule by comparison. Calm down now, chatted Silas, his tone changing for the first time in 12 hours. His face took on a serious expression as he clambered across a series of ropes and walkways to reach Peregrine. I know you're bored, but don't you go making jokes up there. Our fair homelander has only been sleeping for 50 years, and you should know as well as anyone that that's hardly even a nap for him. Our venerable dragon, Lord Rathargir, will certainly be asleep for at least, holy hellspawn of Gaddle Rock, he's awake! Only Silas could make a momentous sight like this seem a chore. Yes, Uncle, Peregrine said with a sigh, and he's coming this way. Should we run? Unless you mean right at his gaping maw, we will do no such thing. This is the greatest honor of the last century. You better bow so low your eyebrows scrape the wicker. Peregrine's eyes flicked down to the wicker basket, every layer of which was covered in elven houses and shanties. He didn't think that display of respect would be particularly appreciated by the inhabitants. Stop it! Standing around to get the offering plates from the charge area! Silas shouted, earning a blanch of surprise from not only Peregrine, but the surrounding elven crew as well. Yes, Peregrine said, unconsciously casting his eyes upward to not look at his demanding if tiny uncle. Right away, sir. He turned around to follow the command. You shall do no such thing, boomed a thunderous voice from behind Peregrine. Though still miles away, Rathargir's eyes bored into Peregrine's spine with such intensity as to force the young elf to his knees. I see a new charge has been brought to live amongst the city of my scales. This is well, for there is much to do and little time. We cannot waste any on ceremony. And land your vessel, dear Silas, and we shall be on our way. The air reverberated with the Wyrm's every word. You heard him, lad. Let's get going. Now it was Silas's turn to sputter, the words choking on tears streaming from his pinprick-sized eyes. Whether it was humiliation or ecstasy, Peregrine could not know. Even as the crew of tiny elves set about on ropes and paddles, vainly hoping to increase the balloon's speed by even the smallest of degrees, Peregrine's shirt pulled taut across his back, tugging itself toward Rathargir. A high-pitched scream of alarm was followed by 6 more as tiny elves were sucked from the safety of their basket village, inexorably pulled toward the gaping maw of Rathargir. Just as Silas had hoped, right into his mouth. Silas is insane, but not as insane as this dragon. He's breathing us in, Peregrine thought frantically. A cry of terror, the likes of which Peregrine had never heard, ripped from his own lungs as he faced his doom. A black pit lined with razor-sharp, boulder-sized fangs. The balloon raced towards that gaping maw. But mere moments before that catastrophe could strike, the pull ceased. Or seized, depending on what you're reading. The leather balloon screeched as it ran along the side of Rathargir's scaly hide. Well, they died in service to the most revered, Silas said sadly, looking down at the earth where his crew members had fallen. Now, time to settle you into your home for the month, he finished chipperly. Peregrine was speechless. The world seemed to be spinning around him.
As the balloon pulled into what looked like a port positioned on the dragon's spine, Peregrine looked up in despair, only to have that despair turn to confusion. The blue balloon that had carried them in was no more. What now held them aloft was glimmering red. Fucking moon witch. Peregrine leapt from the basket, ignoring his uncle's calls for help unloading, as he stumbled into the elven city of Rathargia. As the ground beneath his feet quaked with the dragon's movement, the young elf couldn't help but feel a terrified elation at what lay ahead. All right, every time I read my writing, I'm like, oh, this is sloppy, but, it's fine.
I mean, there's, like, some typos, whatever, but the story
There's
itself...
typos. I use the word tiny a lot, but...
Fuck it. We're not here to talk about the fucking grammar and shit. That's boring. I love this story.
Yeah.
When I read it the first time, I literally, like, ran into the kitchen and was like, Luz, I have to tell you, elves turn into viruses! And I was so excited. Like, the establishment of how elves work, I was like, I am dead. This is exactly what I have always wanted. And also, elves are kind of irritating, and that's amazing. And this teenager is having none of it, and, like, is a very established teenager. Absolutely. Hell yeah.
I just, like, imagine growing up and be like, okay, I get to live this life, and it's gonna be gone for me soon. Like, I guess not soon, but...
I mean, yeah, it's like 1,000 years, but, like...
That feels really quick for a teenager, Like, oh my god. And I also, I originally had that viral crusade. It was going to be the antiviral crusade where they go and fight diseases. And then I was like, wait, but if we just put viral, that could mean whatever.
Yeah, no, I fucking love that. That is amazing.
Yeah, and so basically where he's going, I originally envisioned it as a retirement home, and you just live on this dragon's back. It's kind of evolved into a big old city, but... Yeah.
I don't know if you had said that in the first version that I read, but I love that. I love that this dragon worm thing is becoming like a whole city. I also love the fact that like it's a balloon ride in Arizona where I was like, oh, I know exactly what the fuck you're talking about. I don't know if people who are unfamiliar with Arizona like can ever picture it, but for people who know the Southwest, I was like, oh, I know exactly the landscape you're talking about. I know exactly about why are there so many air balloons in Arizona? Why is that a thing? Literally.
Why? Like, who decided, like, oh, this is balloon country?
But it worked excellently for the story. I also really love that it kind of creates like a steampunk vibe somehow in this story and in this world. I also am having so many like, oh, I really want to use this like dragon worm creature in stories that I write, where I'm like, oh, like, will it be sort of like in the Midwest how there's tornado warnings? Is there gonna be like worm alarm? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like just like
he's coming through.
Yeah, and he's like, you can't do much about it, but it's happening. Yeah, like I'm really excited about that. I really loved how you ended up adding Carly and Rev into the story, and it makes me really want to add Peregrine into the story that I wrote. I love the idea of sort of finding ways to have the characters intertwine throughout the stories that we write. I just also...
It felt right. It just felt right. Like, it also kind of made the story a little sadder for me, where he's like, I live in Minneapolis. I got friends in Minneapolis, and I'm being dragged to Arizona for this freaking family tradition that I gotta do.
Yeah, I guess...
What were you gonna say?
No, I mean, I'm thinking about that, and I guess my immediate feeling was like, the way that I'm envisioning this community that Rev and Carly are part of, it makes so much sense. Because that community that I'm envisioning is a very transient community. It's like people that ride trains a lot, are always on road trips, or just traveling around for weird gig jobs. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It is really sad. I think you're gonna have to write some story about whether he ended up staying on this fucking dragon for a long time. Oh god, that's so sad, because like if it's not a long time, like if it's like an elf amount of time where it's like not a long time but it's still 20 years, like that's depressing as fuck.
I did put in the short story it's for a month, and I'm considering just taking that out. Not because I don't think it should be for a month, just because I think it's more fun just to not define the amount of time he's stuck on that Dragon City.
Yeah, I mean that creates more tension about it as well.
Yeah, I'm realizing I had always intended, not always, but I'd always intended him to be like Rithargir, to be some kind of civilization, and I never said that until that last line, City of Rithargir.
I loved that. That felt like a real twist that like made sense to me. I was into that.
And it's just it's so silly. It's such a like goofy concept.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, I never said how many legs Rithargir has, because his body's miles long. I think it would be nuts if he only had 4 legs.
Oh yeah, I guess I was kind of imagining like a centipede situation.
Yeah, I think that's naturally what comes up, but I really like the idea, at least in this one, of not saying it, so people go, oh, so he has 4 legs. Wait, no, he can't have 4 legs.
Yeah.
Going through that discovery process.
I will say, when you said that he was miles long, I was like, oh fuck no, this is stressful.
I mean, it's bad. Like, you know, there's a reason Peregrine's like, I thought he was asleep.
Yeah.
Like,
I really loved Silas. I felt like that was a very established character that was just like, also the writing, like the way you read his voice, I was very like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. Like, I love this fucking old man. I know exactly who this is.
yeah, in my head, he's kind of my drum teacher that I loved dearly. Yeah, I had so much fun writing this story, and I will say I have no idea why Rithargir's awake. I kind of hadn't intended him to be awake for a reason, and that kind of just wrote itself, where it's like, yeah, I'm awake and I'm doing stuff. And it's like, okay, Dragon Boy, go do what you need to do. I don't know what it is.
I mean, I feel like that's can feed really easily into the kind of absurdity of this world that we're creating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a world where you or I have no idea and I'm not tied to anything, explore why he's awake, and there's also a world where we never talk about it again.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, he's doing his thing. Like, and it's, to him, really important. Might be important to the world just because of how big he is, but
I feel like people
these people over here are making a potion.
Yeah.
So,
this is crazy. I love this.
So this is the world we've established now. There's a Minneapolis. Reagan was president.
There is Uber.
I really there is Uber. There is not Twitch or YouTube. There is as yet undefined streaming service, but there is Uber. Uber is.
Yeah. There's also parks and recreation departments.
Who hate Nightshade.
Yeah.
And any witch herbs.
Oh yeah, that was one thing I wanted to like kind of establish, is that I have this in writing that you can't maybe see, but people who are like not into the witchy shit or like the different races and stuff call themselves regulars, or at least people who are not that call them regulars.
Yeah, I didn't see that the first time, but it stuck out to me like when you were reading. I was like, oh, like there is like us and them kind of thing forming here.
Yeah. We also
and
now
I
have
liked that. I think
established.
that's important.
Yeah, I have now established that there is a miles-long dragon worm that just happens to be awake sometimes.
He's going somewhere.
Yeah, and I would imagine if 50 years isn't even a nap for him, probably gonna be around for
Yeah, and he's probably grumpy too. He's like, something woke me up, motherfucker.
Yeah, something woke this guy up. It's not a good look. It's fucked.
And I will say, I kind of messed up in communicating this in my writing. The balloon was dyed blue, right? But the heat of his breath pulled the blue dye off and like tinged the leather red. Just the pure heat of his presence, like just being around this dragon, just turned the balloon red. Which
Oh, that's funny.
doesn't really make sense when I say it out loud, but like there's something there. Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of entertaining because I thought what was entertaining to me in this story is that it's like, oh yeah, like elves become viruses, which is also now canon. Is that elves become viruses, but they're like 7 feet tall when they're in their 20s. But they just shrink and shrink and shrink. And there's also this Miles
What a
Long worm
horrifying
guy.
race.
But you know what's crazy is this balloon started out blue.
That was the twist at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like pretty entertaining for me. So.
Also, just throwing out the casual murder of a bunch of elves where he's like, yeah, come aboard to my city, beloved elves. Also, those ones are dead now as I sucked them off your basket.
Yeah. Oh, they died in a great honorable way. Anyway, here we are now. Jesus fucking Christ.
The more I wrote this, the more I realized I think elves are like cockroaches, right? Like, I think
Don't say that.
they just... Sorry, was that offensive?
No, I just hate cockroaches.
Right, I forgot. You got some trauma on cockroaches. They, I was about to say they're like rodents, but I don't think that's better for you.
They're prolific.
They're very prolific. I think like every elf family has like dozens of children, right? And they just, I like the idea that the reason they get so tall, so big to begin with, is so that they can breed with other species, and those babies are always elves.
Oh.
So it's like you get to 7 feet tall so that you can get with a big old ogre or troll, and then that troll has elf babies. And
Whoa. Wait, does it become like part troll, or is it just purely like dominant genes are always elves?
that's something I'm open to. I do think it kind of makes sense to me that the dominant genes are always elves, and that is how this species like is attempting to dominate the world in a way. But I'm also open. I do like the idea of a half troll, half elf. Like, I do think that's very funny. So I don't want to say that doesn't happen.
Oh my god. This is a fucked up world we're creating.
Just, like, there's like colonialism and capitalism, then there's this nightmare viral crusade?
Yeah.
Horrible.
Oh god. Here we go. Cool.
This is a part of the podcast I think the most interesting. I don't know where how we get into it, of like what do we do going forward? Like, so this world, I guess we've talked about how this world is impacted by our short stories.
Yeah.
What do we want to do moving forward for these next stories?
Okay, I'm kind of struggling because I'm like, I really am enjoying all of the characters that have been brought forward. But we have agreed that we're not just going to keep the same characters going, and I think we have to stay true to that. So,
I've said again, I'll just say one more time. I think we should keep the characters we've made, but be constantly making new perspective characters. I think there should always be a new person whose perspective we're speaking from.
yeah.
They might have been a background character in another thing, but I think it is important, like, for us and for the audience, like, we want to be able to connect to people and, like,
Yeah.
be like, this is someone I like and know, and have some grounding element. And I think that's okay if we have that for these. I think it's also okay if sometimes we throw that away, but I think it's okay to build that.
Yeah. I think we should be careful about it. I don't want to get like too stuck,
yeah.
But yeah, I think we can bring back same people, but not necessarily the same perspectives at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we should look at what the old witch is gonna say for this next one. Do you want me to? I could pull some oracle cards. I could pull up a word generator.
Oh, that's so fun. Pull an oracle card. I'm gonna grab my dragon deck real quick. I actually hate my dragon tarot card, but it feels right for this moment.
So I'm using just right now Woodland Warden's deck.
Adorable.
So every card has an animal and a plant on it. And I think we should like not necessarily go with like the really face value of this card, but like maybe
For sure.
do some like what is that called when you just like first words that pop into your brain after you word association with it, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we could do that.
Go ahead.
We definitely could do that. We also could just do, she drew that card, and then whatever interpretation everyone has for it.
Yeah. I guess my question is like, then how do you get balloons? Which is pretty specific.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Oh, we didn't say this earlier. Her tarot deck is infinite. Like, there are cards that are pulled from it that are never seen again.
And there's also like debate. Is it like an actual physical card, or is it because like sometimes it's like smoke in her palm, or like dice that she rolls, or like a picture she sees in the flame, you know, like
I love the idea she pulled a card and it just turned into a balloon, and she went, huh,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah, I'm into that.
Yeah, I think, so there's one idea for the Moon Witch that I wanted to float to you. Because, you know, we talked about she has all these different ways of telling the future, and she just chooses on the day. I really like the idea that she has 12 to 100 identical twin sisters who all live on the moon, and they take turns. And I'm not, like, locked into this idea. It's just really silly to me. Everybody's like, ooh, the Moon Witch. And then upstairs, you know, all the Moon Witches are like having tea parties and fighting about whose towel they're using, doing sibling stuff. But Devil, it's like, oh, the venerable Moon Witch. And they're like, no, I am going to tell the future with sticks today, Esmeralda, and you can't stop me. It's my turn.
I am into that. My hesitancy right now is that's like I'm almost like, do I want that to be established in the world right away, or is that?
I don't think it should be.
Do you think like people on Earth even know about it?
No, I think there might be like one tiny sect that's like, yo, there's more than one Moon Witch. Everyone's like, oh, you're nuts. Like, get out of, go to your own church. Stop ruining our thing.
Weird, like conspiracy theorists. I'm into that.
Exactly. Like, there's an online forum.
So here's my question in terms of the fact that we are recording right now. Do we want the listeners to even know about that?
I mean, I'm okay with them knowing, but I'm also okay with deleting if you want to be more secretive about it. But I like the idea of people like who listen to this episode being like, oh wait, what? Which Moon Witch is it? And trying to like in each one kind of drawing those connections.
Okay. Yeah, I'm into them knowing. I'm debating how much it's hard because I feel like actually in both of our minds we really are establishing the Moon Witch without having written about her. And we are going to have to actually face her head on at some point. And I'm nervous about it too.
At some point, I do think having one of the perspective characters being one of the Moon Witches is maybe not a must, but a definite, like, there's a whole
religious structure that I want to explore with her, but I don't feel any interest in doing that yet.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get there when we get there.
And yeah, I think it'll be easier to do later on anyway, by just kicking the can down the road. That's always better, right?
All right, do you want to know the card that I pulled?
Yeah.
All right, it was the cat and lavender, meaning independence.
Ooh. Oh, I like that.
Oh, shit.
Very cool. I pulled 3 tarot cards,
Oh, shit.
and
Okay.
I'm okay with any of them being used or none of them being used. But I pulled the 8 of Pentacles, the Devil,
Sick.
and the Ace of Wands.
So I don't know enough about tarot to know what the fuck any of that means. Except for the
Okay,
devil,
so
obviously.
8 of Pentacles is hard. It's basically hard work, like a craftsman. Perfecting their craft, learning how to make their art or their work, and just diligently working at it every day. And then the Devil is like, I always think of it as addictions or pursuing pleasure over practicality. Yeah, this deck kind of sucks because like the illustrations don't really add much to the meaning, but it's fine. And then aces are always opportunities that can be seized, but aren't necessarily going to be. Ace of Wands, yeah, it's the beginning of some great new practical venture or career. The time is right for putting your boldest ideas into action, pushing back the boundaries of possibility, and sharing your enthusiasm with the world. Everything is flowing your way. Now's the time to exercise your talents, stake out your territory, and show the world what you can do. Reversed is warning of the danger of getting too attached to new beginnings that haven't been thought through properly, of being unrealistic and not fully committed to your undertakings. There's a slim chance of success here, but only if you work at it.
So what's hard about this is it feels like it's hard to be pulling tarot decks because it also feels like we're pulling them for ourselves rather than for this story. And that's
yeah,
tricky.
maybe the tarot decks. I will say, for like I could see this applied to both Paragram and Carly and Rocco, and Rev, but I do see your point there.
I mean, I think that the vibes could definitely all work. Like independence, lavender, cats, the devil. Like it's like a struggle that I'm seeing between sort of working hard or playing hard and the relationships you have with people in that.
Yeah.
And
I think for me, drawing those cards is just a good way of getting ideas for how it all goes. I like the independence, like work hard for your independence kind of a thing.
So what would be?
And I think I might be lazy with my Moon Witch thing for at least this one, where the character, they don't listen to the Moon Witch, they listen to a podcaster who interprets what the Moon Witch says. And so it's like, well, good old Rotho told me that this means independence and I should work hard on my scripts today. So
I want to fight that. I feel like that gets us off of the ways that we've like established that we're gonna create these prompts for ourselves. What if the Moon Witch does say in her vague ass way independence, and then people have to deal with that as they will?
All right. That's fair.
If you want a random word generator, I did just pull up the word beef. But it starts to get a little stupid, so maybe we should just go with independence.
No, I really like the idea of independence, like a cat in lavender, running free, and then the next card just turns into a big old lump of steak. She's like, well, I don't even need to explain that. That's obvious.
Well, we only can do one card. We have to create something. I know it's stupid, but we have to be narrow for ourselves. Because it's more challenging that way. That's what we're doing.
I don't like that. I don't like let's make it as challenging as possible. Also, if I were doing a collective reading for the world, I would never do one card. That's such a bad idea. For a collective reading, I would do 9 cards. And that's why, like, in my story, I said he caught the last bit, and it said red balloons, implying there was a lot more, but he didn't read it. Because I think that, like, a tarot reader I love does, like, weekly readings of 12 cards for each sign, and they vary wildly, and they're 20 minutes each. And I think if you're doing through the entire world, you gotta be doing at least 3, if not a full spread of 12. There's a word, there's a name for that spread that I'm forgetting. But,
Okay, so let's just have it then that she does 3 cards per day,
all right.
and that we have to choose from them. And it sounds like we've got beef, we've got independence, and let's go with the one, what was it exactly for the, like, working hard? Or should we go with the devil?
Oh, the 8 of Pentacles?
What should we do?
Here, heads or tails?
Tails.
Alright, tails is going to be the devil. Alright, it's tails.
So the devil, cat and lavender, independence, and beef.
Yeah.
Does it have to use all of them, or some element of some of these?
I think some element of some of them. I think, the whole point of a collective reading is it means different things to different people. Different people focus on different parts. So beef might just be all that matters, or independence to someone else, or all of it matters. But I think just, like, at least some component of those 3.
Okay.
Which I know it gives a lot of flexibility, but I don't know. It's that line of finding a good writing exercise while also making it make sense for the world for me.
Let's play with it. I mean, it'll be our second time, so you and I can also just be like, this isn't what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. There is some flexibility for us. But yeah, do you think we're good for?
Yeah, I feel like we made a
Today?
lot of really good progress. I had a lot of fun with these stories. So I feel pretty good
Yeah.
closing out.
This
Yeah.
is great. Same.
Cool. So-
I always look forward to recording with you, and I appreciate all the work you do.
Yeah.
For the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for
Alright.
sharing with me today. And yeah, I love you too. I love all of the things.
Fantastic.
All right, so in closing, we would like to give a special thanks to Natalie for our amazing cover art. We'll edit that so we put in Natalie's last name.
Becker.
Becker. We'd like to... Let's restart all of that. We'll cut out what I just said. All right, in closing, we'd like to give a special thank you to Natalie Becker for our amazing cover art. And a special thank you to whoever does our music for this episode. Our parents for giving birth to us. And I'd like to give a special thank you to my partner, Luz, for keeping me sane as I do this work. Is there anybody you'd like to give a special thank you to?
Yeah, I would like to thank my parents for supporting us, Grit for having this idea and working to make it a reality, and all my dear friends for supporting me. Natalie Becker being one of them, and all the wonderful people that I've met along the way. And if you liked what you heard today, be sure to like our podcast and subscribe. Call to action.
Do not say
Heck
that.
yeah.
Go back.
It's kind of been ruined now. So
Start over. It's
if
fine.
you like what you heard, if you like what you've heard today, be sure to smack your computer. Just hit all of the keys on the keyboard, and maybe that'll end with us being liked and subscribed. Just do it. Just I want you to hit 4 random keys, all right? And throw the mouse.
and see what the Moon Witch divines for us. You know, if she wants you to be subscribed to us, then you will be at the end of it. And tune in 2 weeks to see to hear our next podcast, or hop on the Patreon to hear it now. Coffee! Hear it early.
Amazing. Until then, stay safe and keep your ears open for any moonbeams that may shine down upon you.
All the best. Love, Grid and Sam.
Bye!
This is a repeat song.
This is a repeat song.
You can't ride in my little red wagon.
You can't ride in my little red wagon.
Front seat's broken and the axle's dragging.
Front seat's broken and the axle's dragging.
I think that's all there is.
Oh my god, then it goes chuga, 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 chuga.
What? Chuga, 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 chuga.
Second verse, same as the first, but a whole lot.
Wait, how do you start
lot
leading?
worse.
Second verse, same as the first, a whole lot louder, a whole lot worse.
You can't ride in a little red wagon.
You can't ride in my little red wagon.
Front seat's broken and the axle's dragging.
Front seat's broken and the axle's dragging.
Chuga, 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 chuga.
Chuga, 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 chuga. I just want to be clear, I knew about the first verse thing. It was the chuga, chuga. I don't think we did that at Camp de Betaville. We just did the first part and would just start screaming it, which has always struck me as kind of a bad song, but that's why I like it. But I think that's enough.
Cool. God, okay. Then we're just gonna get into it. Are you ready?
Yeah.